The moment she stepped out of her bedroom wearing that new dress, I forgot how to breathe. I had seen my roommate, Claire, in pajamas, messy hair, and oversized hoodies more times than I could count, but that night she looked completely different. She stood in the hallway, turned slowly, and asked the simplest question in the world, "How does this look?" I meant to answer immediately. Instead, I stared for a second too long. She noticed. A tiny smile appeared on her face, and she tilted her head before saying, "Want a better look?" What she didn't know was that my silence had nothing to do with the dress. It had everything to do with the secret I had been carrying for months. If you believe that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who help us find a second chance when we least expect it, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. You never know when a simple story might remind someone that their life can still change. My name was Daniel, and for nearly a year, Claire and I had shared a small apartment above an old bakery on the edge of town. We weren't dating. We weren't even the kind of roommates who spent every evening together. We were simply two people who had somehow ended up under the same roof while trying to put broken pieces of our lives back together. Claire worked at a children's bookstore downtown, while I worked long shifts repairing appliances. We split the rent, took turns buying groceries, and occasionally argued over whose turn it was to take out the trash. From the outside, we probably looked like ordinary roommates. But ordinary was never the word I would have used for what was happening inside that apartment. Claire had a way of noticing things people tried to hide. She could tell when I had skipped dinner. She knew when I was pretending to be okay. And she had somehow figured out that every Sunday evening, when I disappeared for an hour, I wasn't meeting friends. I was visiting my younger sister, Hannah, at the rehabilitation center across town. Hannah had been struggling after a terrible accident, and the medical bills had nearly destroyed our family. Our mother had passed away years earlier, and our father had disappeared from our lives long before that. Hannah was the only family I had left. I worked constantly because every extra dollar went toward her treatment. Claire knew some of this, but not all of it. I had never told her about the nights when I sat in my car outside the rehabilitation center, staring at the steering wheel because I was afraid to walk inside and see how much pain my sister was still in. I hadn't told her that I sometimes pretended everything was fine because admitting I was scared made me feel weak. Then one rainy Thursday evening, Claire came home carrying a small shopping bag. She disappeared into her room, and about 20 minutes later, she stepped into the hallway wearing a deep blue dress. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't revealing. It was simple, elegant, and somehow made her look completely confident. She looked at me with an uncertain expression and asked how it looked. I looked up from the repair manual in my hands, and for those few seconds, the entire apartment seemed silent. I realized then that I had been noticing Claire for much longer than I wanted to admit. Not because of her appearance, but because of the little things. The way she left a cup of coffee beside my tools when I worked late. The way she quietly covered my share of groceries when money was tight. The way she always left the hallway light on when I came home after midnight because she knew I hated walking into a completely dark apartment. That night, however, she noticed my hesitation. Her smile became playful, and she asked if I wanted a better look. I laughed nervously and told her the dress looked great. She studied my face for another second before walking toward the kitchen. But just before she disappeared around the corner, she smiled again and said she already knew what I was thinking. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. The truth was, I was thinking about how dangerous it felt to care about someone when your life was already falling apart. Over the next few weeks, something changed between us. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no sudden declarations or movie-like moments. Instead, the distance between us slowly disappeared. Claire began sitting beside me at breakfast instead of across the table. I started telling her about Hannah. She listened without trying to fix everything. Sometimes she simply sat there while I talked, and somehow that silence felt more comforting than any advice. One evening, I came home exhausted and found Claire sitting on the floor beside a stack of unopened envelopes. She had been crying. I immediately asked what was wrong, and she tried to laugh it off. Eventually, she admitted that the bookstore was closing and she had lost her job. She had been pretending everything was fine because she didn't want to become another problem I had to worry about. That sentence broke something inside me. I told her that she wasn't a problem. She never had been. For the first time, Claire looked directly into my eyes and asked why I always treated everyone else like they deserved help while acting as if I didn't. I had no answer. The following morning, I discovered something that changed everything. Claire had secretly been taking extra shifts at a cafe and saving every spare dollar. She wasn't saving for herself. She had been helping with Hannah's rehabilitation bills without telling me. She had even spoken to a local charity about finding additional financial assistance for my sister. I was stunned. When I confronted her, she simply told me that she knew what it felt like to be afraid of losing someone. Her younger brother had died years earlier, and she had spent years blaming herself because she hadn't been there when he needed her. Suddenly, the dress, the teasing smile, and every little moment between us made sense. Claire wasn't just someone who had entered my life by coincidence. She was someone who understood what it meant to carry guilt, fear, and loneliness. A few days later, Hannah's condition finally began improving. The doctors said the progress was small but significant. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that my sister might actually have a future. That evening, I returned home to find Claire standing in the same hallway where everything had started. She was wearing that blue dress again. She looked nervous this time. She asked me if I still remembered the first night she had worn it. I smiled and told her I remembered everything. Then she admitted that she had known for months that I cared about her. She said she had teased me that night because she wanted to know whether there was something behind my silence. But she had never wanted to pressure me. She simply wanted me to know that if I ever decided to take a chance on someone again, she would be there. I looked at her, and for once, I wasn't afraid. I told her that I had spent so much time trying to save everyone else that I had forgotten I was allowed to be happy too. She stepped closer, took my hand, and reminded me that happiness wasn't something we earned after fixing every problem. Sometimes it was something we found while the problems were still there. Months later, Hannah walked into the apartment using only a small support brace. Claire was standing beside me when it happened. Hannah looked between us, smiled, and immediately asked if she had missed something. We laughed. For the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel like a temporary place where broken people were waiting for life to get better. It felt like home. And that was the real lesson Claire had taught me. Sometimes love doesn't arrive dramatically. Sometimes it looks like a roommate leaving the hallway light on. Sometimes it looks like someone quietly paying a bill you couldn't afford. Sometimes it looks like a teasing smile after you stare at a dress for too long. And sometimes, the person who asks, "Want a better look?" isn't really asking you to look at them. They're asking you to look again at your own life and realize that maybe, just maybe, there is still something beautiful waiting for you. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need a second chance, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support can help these stories reach someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Before you go, leave a comment saying, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that even broken lives can find their way back to something beautiful. Because sometimes the person standing beside you isn't there by accident. Sometimes they are the reminder you needed all along that no matter how dark yesterday was, tomorrow can still be worth looking forward to.